in the spirit of leaving no one behind, our next speaker is the Executive Director and CEO of the Sioux YMCA in the United States, which is the only YMCA on a Native American reservation in my home country. And Andrew spends a lot of his time traveling around trying to let people know that this community exists and trying to gain some support, doing everything from running marathons in Mexico soon, right?
So, very soon, this December. Yeah, you want to support them. They will be running in Cancun in December this year.
So cool. I mean, I'm glad it's him and not me doing the running. But it's incredible work. And in rehearsing, Andrew and I talked a lot about what it means for us as Y workers when we are constantly trying to fill others' cups, which is a metaphor that he'll discuss in just a little bit. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Corley.
I stand in front of you as the CEO of the Sioux YMCA, but I'm also a change agent, a millennial, a superhero. Like me, the YMCA is so many things. We are a chart-topping pop song from back in the day. We are a global alliance present with 120 movements. We are the center of our communities, of our countries, around the world. Whether you're on the shores of Lome teaching young women how to be entrepreneurs, building a beautiful camp in Kosovo for war-impacted communities, or a life coach in Minneapolis working with foster youth through some of their hardest times, we all have the same cornerstone. We're all here to do one job, to change the world. Changing the world isn't this big, drastic dream. It's as simple as being there for that one person. We're here to make a brighter future, focusing on spirit, body, and mind. We are a life-saving global entity. We are the closest thing this world's going to get to the Avengers, but we have a much larger team. We're the center of our communities, the heroes in our communities, unafraid to take on any challenge. We do our superhero jobs with whatever resources we have, forming the triangle of spirit, body, and mind. I want you to take a moment. Picture what someone looks like who has a healthy spirit. Do you see a priest, a rabbi, a shaman? What does someone look like when they don't have an unhealthy spirit, when they have an unhealthy spirit? They can pray, they can reflect, they can meditate, they can go to mass. Now I want you to picture someone who has a healthy body. Is it a bodybuilder, a marathon runner, a gymnast? If someone's unfit, they can swim, run, go to Zumba. Now, what does it look like to have a healthy mind? Who do you see? The person to your left and to your right, you can't tell if they're struggling with mental health or if they're doing fine, and it fluctuates day by day. In recent years in the United States, there's been a big push for work-life balance. Often we use the metaphor of making sure your glass is full before you take on another challenge. In order to have a healthy work-life balance, you're going to have to pour some of your cup into others, but you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. If you're not taking care of yourself, how are you going to make an impact for those around you, bringing them to their potential? A superhero, like one of the Avengers, like one of you, will do whatever they can to fill the people's glasses around them, sometimes before looking at what you have in your glass. This is a lesson I learned when I worked on my first week working for the YMCA all those years ago. And this week changed my life forever. Just as Peter Parker got bit by a radioactive spider and became Spider-Man, I got hit with a radioactive paddle to become my own superhero. I don't know what that says about my superpower. But instead of a spider, he was a teen. And instead of him biting me, he was the most challenging camper I ever had. The Y camp I was working at was in Massachusetts. We had 2 weeks of staff training where we learned some basic rules like don't have favorite campers, but dove deep into challenging behaviors and seeing the extreme behaviors that we have through scenarios and role-playing. The training ended and it was check-in day for the first week. Me and my co-counselor were beyond excited. The campers started rolling in, the first 5 were there, they were playing and having a great time. We thought this is gonna be an amazing session. Then Dean walked in, and you could just feel it. He walked up to his bunk, took his name tag and ripped it off because he didn't like the lion drawing that was on it. My co and I looked at each other. This is gonna be a real treat. Dean had the special ability to exemplify and embody all of those negative behavioral challenges into one camper, making him the ideal camper from hell. Dean's behavior was so intense, his actions required constant attention. We actually had to call in another camp counselor, so while the 2 counselors were able to manage the cabin and the day-to-day activities, I got the pleasure of working with Dean one-on-one. As the weeks went on, I got insulted, berated, mocked, teased. The final straw was when he threw a paddle at my head while we were in the canoe. I lost it. After all, a person can only take so much torture. Dean seemed healthy on the outside. He was energetic, physically fit. He even prayed before bed. When we got to shore, I sat down with him and had a stern talking, borderline yelling moment with him. Dean's head was down, face in his hands. And he looks up and he's bawling. I thought, why is he crying? I have a concussion. I talked with Dean for 2 hours that day. He was afraid that he had pushed me too far and that I was going to abandon him like every other adult has abandoned Dean throughout his whole entire life. Started peeling back the layers. What was his mental health status? Spiritually, physically, he was fine. But mentally, where was he? We peel back the layers, he opens up. He dives into the neglect, the self-harm, the domestic violence he's been witnessed and a part of, and the sexual exploitation he's endured his entire life at 13. It was all so clear. Our jobs at the YMCA love titles. You might be camp counselor or program director, but all that title means is you're in a position to do great things with those individuals, to change their world. When we address mental health, we have a chance to transform those lives. When the extreme situation of not having a plan to support the mental health of our youth is suicide, we need to get to work. So focusing on Dean, I only had a week left with him. I needed to do my superhero job. I needed to change his world. I poured all my resources into him. My time, my money, my compassion, my resources that I had at my disposal, which wasn't much at 17. Dean and I stayed connected over the years. And just like Dean broke all our rules, I had to break one, and he became my favorite camper. So I know, being the superheroes that you all are, you pour from your glass to fill up around you. That's your superpower. And with great power comes great responsibility. But your glasses can only refill at a trickle, and Dean's glass is getting harder and harder to fill. And what you do when you've been spending years connecting with Dean, working with him through all of these issues, filling his glass as much as I can, and one day, it gets smashed. Many of us here have likely experienced losing a youth to suicide. So what do you do when you have all those feelings of hatred and loneliness and despair, and it's building up in a rush of hurt, and you can't breathe, and you don't know what to do, and you hear the news, and you're choking on the sense of failure, not feeling like a hero, but more like a villain, because hero saves lives, and you lost that life. And you have nothing but loss. What do you do when you're at Dean's funeral, holding back tears to put the facade of being strong, to being that superhero? But then you start hearing his friends and family talk. During his eulogy, they're talking about the lessons that Dean passed on to them. And then you realize that this whole time, Dean has been taking from his glass and pouring it to all the people around him. He's been filling their glass. That slow trickle that was coming through Dean's cracks and the big splash from when he finally broke it all overflowed to his family's glasses, to his whole world. It even flowed back into mine. But the lesson flowed from me to him to them. That the world I had changed for Dean had changed the world for his entire world. All the people he had ever touched were changed by him. That as much as I poured in him, it wasn't wasted. In fact, all of that I poured into Dean was amplified because he was able to affect his whole world. My money, time, effort, resources, all benefited Dean's entire world. There was nothing I could have done to save him. And as good of a superhero as I want to be, the hardest fact you have to know is you can't save everyone. His short life wasn't a failure. It was a lesson. That even though suicide ended his life, and I couldn't stop it, I was able to make his life better. I was able to give him a better world. And I found out that Dean changed my world. I had to lean into that change because it was so important for him to change my world, and it needed to stick with me forever. So I decided to figure out how I can make the biggest impact and change as many lives as possible. I eventually left the Y in Boston and moved all the way out to South Dakota. At the age of 23, I became one of the youngest CEOs in the YMCA movement. Although every Y is unique, the Sioux Y is definitely the most interesting. Come out and visit, we'll show you. We're located in the middle of the US, the only YMCA on a Native American reservation. Because of this, we got great opportunities, but we also got some great barriers. Our community members are faced with the highest child poverty levels in all of North America, where there's suicide attempts on a daily basis, where it's a third world nation in the heart of America. Our camp staff act more like social workers than programmers because they have to, because they're the superheroes in our community. Dean's influence has created an intentional focus, and with me being able to change so many lives, and for me being in the CEO position, the next 3 years we're going to be focusing on making sure all of our programs have trauma-informed care curriculums. All of our staff, all of our volunteers, program and board members will go through mental health first aid trainings. We will make sure that this doesn't happen again. Changing the world is lofty. But what if I told you changing the world is as easy as being there for Dean? Being a shoulder to cry on. The role model for that one individual. The one safe adult he ever felt connected to. That yes, there's 7 billion people on this planet, but each has their own unique world. So that's 7 billion worlds we can change. So like I was able to change the world for Dean, you can change the world for that one person, and then the next one, and the next one. And they'll change the world for that one person, and it'll spiderweb across the whole planet. That leaders in your community, we can all agree that we cannot and we will not let mental health continue to be overlooked and forgotten. That this is the reason we wake up in the morning. We clock in, we put our superhero cape on, we do our best jobs to change the world. But most importantly, I need you all to be the change. Thank you.